You know, it is this totally universal human experience to walk into a shared space, maybe it is a community part, or a shared digital folder at work, or even just the office kitchen, and you just find an absolute chaotic
Oh
mess.
yeah, a complete disaster zone.
Right. You look around at the overflowing trash or, those files named something like final version V8 real final, and you just think, why can't we just share things without everything falling apart?
It is a question we have all asked, honestly.
Exactly. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are speaking directly to you, the learner, whether you are leading a team, managing a massive project, or just trying to figure out how to collaborate with other human beings without losing your mind. Our mission today is really to decode how to successfully share and manage resources without the whole system collapsing.
Which is no small task, by the way.
No, definitely not. And to figure that out, we are pulling together this amazing stack of sources. We have a fascinating article on the Nobel laureate Elinor Ostrom, insights on relational intelligence, and a look at the modern AEC industry. Plus, we are going to look at these three really unique diagrams called the diamond models.
Yeah, those diamond models are going to be crucial later on.
They really are. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Hmm.
Because for decades, there has been this deeply cynical belief that people will just inevitably destroy a shared resource out of selfish greed.
Right. The assumption has almost always been that collaboration is, well, it is fundamentally doomed. Unless a strict boss steps in to control everyone, or, unless the resource is entirely privatized and sold off to individuals, human nature will just ruin the shared space. It is famously called the tragedy of the commons.
The tragedy of the commons, it sounds so dramatic.
It does. But what's fascinating here is that our deep dive today is going to completely flip that tragedy on its head.
Wait, really?
Yeah, absolutely. The sources we are exploring show that everyday communities have actually been solving this shared resource problem for centuries. And the ways they organize themselves, the specific relational tools they used, they are the exact blueprints we need to survive the modern digital and AI age.
That is incredible. So, to really grasp the magnitude of how we manage complex modern systems today, we kind of have to go back to this foundational moment in 1968. There was an ecologist named Garrett Hardin, and he wrote this incredibly influential article outlining this tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, that article really set the stage for how we thought about economics for a long time.
It really did. He asked readers to imagine a shared cow pasture. So you have multiple herders sharing this one piece of land. Every single herder looks at the pasture, and they run this quick mental calculation.
Right, here looking at the bottom line.
Exactly. They think, if I add just one more animal to my personal herd, I get 100% of the profit from that animal. But the cost of the overgrazing, well, that is shared by everybody. So, acting entirely rationally, every herder adds more livestock.
And we all know how that ends.
Yeah. Eventually, the pasture's eaten down to the dirt and completely destroyed.
And, economists and policymakers treated that logic as undeniable gospel for decades. They really believed that if everyone pursues their own immediate advantage, the shared resource is exhausted. They boxed themselves into a corner where human selfishness was just viewed as this unstoppable force of nature.
I always pictured the shared office refrigerator when I read about this.
Oh, the office fridge is the ultimate tragedy of the commons.
It totally is. If everyone acts in their own, rational self-interest, nobody cleans up the spilled milk, everyone leaves their expired yogurt because, well, someone else will throw it out. And within a month, the fridge turns into a chaotic, passive-aggressive wasteland. Hardin's logic rings true because we have all seen the fridge.
We have all seen the fridge. And because of that, authorities believed there were really only two possible solutions to save the pasture, or the fridge, I guess.
Right, the two false solutions.
Exactly. One option was privatization. You divide the pasture into little fenced-off squares so everyone only grazes on their own private land.
And like giving everyone their own mini fridge.
Yeah, exactly like that. And the other option was centralized government. You bring in a top-down authority, like a boss or a state regulator, who stands at the gate and strictly dictates how many cows are allowed in. For a very long time, those were the only two options on the menu.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for a massive disruption. Enter Elinor Ostrom. She was a political economist, and in 2009, she became the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics.
Which is a huge milestone on its own.
Huge. And she achieved that by acting like a total rebel in her field. Instead of looking at all these failing pastures and asking why commons fail, she looked out at the world and asked a profoundly different question. She asked, why do some commons actually succeed?
And her approach was just entirely grounded in the real world. She didn't just sit in a university office theorizing, right? She went out and studied actual human behavior.
Yeah, getting her boots on the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She looked at farmers sharing complex irrigation systems in Nepal. She studied communities managing communal grazing lands in Switzerland, fisheries in Maine, and villages managing forests in Japan. And the most astonishing part, some of these arrangements hadn't just survived for a few years. They had survived for centuries.
Centuries. Without a centralized CEO and without privatizing the land, that completely shatters the binary choice Hardin presented.
It absolutely shatters it. These communities survived using what the sources call a third way. They weren't relying on pure market competition and fences, and they weren't relying on top-down state control and guards. They built self-governing networks.
Self-governing networks. I like that.
Yeah, and these networks were deeply rooted in trust, interpersonal relationships, and local rules that the community just created together.
So, if these communities survived for hundreds of years without a top-down boss yelling at everyone to do their part, how did they actually organize themselves? Because that sounds like magic.
It sounds like it, but it is highly structural. The source material breaks down Ostrom's practical framework. She basically spent her career identifying the underlying patterns that all these successful commons share, and she distilled them into 8 design principles.
Okay, 8 design principles. Let's unpack those.
Well, when we look at these 8 principles, we have to avoid a very common trap. It is incredibly easy to look at a list of principles and see them as just, administrative rules or HR policies. But they aren't. They are relational tools.
Relational tools. Okay, give me an example.
For instance, the very first principle is clearly defined boundaries. A successful community knows exactly who belongs to the group, who doesn't, what specific resources being shared, and what responsibilities come with participating. If you don't know the boundaries, you just cannot possibly have accountability.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I mean, if everybody in a 50-person department is supposedly responsible for maintaining a shared project file, nobody is actually responsible for it.
Exactly. The bystander effect kicks in.
Right. You need a boundary that says, these 5 specific people are the stewards of this file.
Yeah, participation requires a boundary. Another critical principle she identified is collective choice arrangements. This simply means that if you are a person affected by the rules, you must have a voice in making those rules. It is really about participation, creating a sense of ownership.
Because if the rules are just handed down to you, you resent them.
Precisely. And then there is the need for monitoring and accessible conflict resolution. Healthy commons do not pretend that everyone will always get along. Conflict is absolutely inevitable when humans work together.
For sure.
So, successful communities establish low-cost, highly trusted ways to handle disputes constructively. Our sources actually connect this directly to the work of conflict resolution thinkers like Marshall Rosenberg and John Paul Wetterack. The goal is navigating disagreement without destroying the underlying relationships.
Okay, wait, I want to push back on something here, specifically regarding Principle 5, which is graduated sanctions. This basically means having proportional consequences for breaking the rules.
Right. Graduated meaning they scale up.
Yeah. So what does this all mean? If we want to keep the commons safe, whether it is a vital fishery or like a critical digital database, why not just have a zero-tolerance policy? Wouldn't a strict one-strike-and-you're-out rule be the most effective way to strike fear into bad actors and stop bad behavior? Like if someone deletes the shared folder, they are out. Why graduate the sanctions?
It is a very common instinct to want strict punishment. But Ostrom's research found that zero-tolerance policies actually destroy the commons from the inside out. Successful communities apply consequences that escalate based on severity, frequency, and intent.
Really? They destroy the commons? How?
Consider what happens in a zero-tolerance environment. Governance becomes unnecessarily punitive. People become terrified. They stop trusting the system. And worse, they stop trusting each other. If someone makes an honest mistake and accidentally deletes a file, a zero-tolerance policy guarantees the other they will try to hide that mistake instead of fixing it.
I see. So the cover-up becomes worse than the crime, all because the environment is just too hostile to admit fault.
Precisely the issue. If someone makes a minor mistake, it requires a conversation and a correction. Only repeated or malicious violations get stronger action. You have to maintain accountability, but you cannot do it in the way that destroys the relationships you rely on to govern in the first place.
Wow, okay. You are governing the relationships, not just the resource. That is a huge paradigm shift.
It really is.
And if zero-tolerance policies destroy relationships, then the entire shape of our traditional corporate hierarchy, which is, often built to enforce strict compliance, has to change. And the sources actually map out what that change looks like, moving away from traditional top-down pyramids toward distributed networks.
Yes, the visuals in the source text are super helpful here.
They are. They provide this fascinating way to visualize this using 3 diagrams called the diamond models. Let's explore the first one. The gray diamond. This maps out a culture of stagnation.
Right, the traditional industrial age model.
Exactly. Think about a rigid top-down hierarchy. The environment this diamond represents is just toxic. When all the authority and vision are hoarded at the very top of the organization, the people up there are consumed by anxiety and internal politics. That is what is labeled at the top point of the diamond.
When the pressure is immense up there.
Right. Meanwhile, what happens to the people on the outer edges, or at the bottom? The workers on the sides just check out. So the left point of the diamond is labeled apathy and social disconnect. The right point is economics and avoidance. They actively avoid making decisions because the environment is built on accusation.
Yeah, that bottom point is key. Physical environment and accusation.
Yeah, if something goes wrong, the immediate response is to find someone to blame.
It represents a system completely consumed by preserving its own existing structures. When authority flows only downward, active participation just declines. The system becomes rigid, and adaptation to new challenges becomes almost impossible.
It sounds miserable, honestly. Now contrast that feeling with the second model, the red diamond diagram. This is the productive space of what Ostrom called polycentric governance, meaning there are multiple centers of responsibility, not just one boss at the top.
This is where things get really dynamic.
Exactly. In the red diamond, the culture completely flips. The labels change. Instead of anxiety at the top, you have awareness and vision. Instead of apathy and avoidance on the sides, you have adaptability and evolve on the left, and anticipation and exchange on the right. It's a free exchange of ideas.
And the bottom point changes too.
It does. At the foundation, instead of a culture of accusation, you have context, accountability, and abundance. It is an environment built entirely on flow and learning.
The most profound detail in these diagrams, however, is what sits in the middle. Both the gray diamond and the red diamond share the exact same inner cycle.
Wait, really? The same core?
Yes. Inside both shapes, there is a sequence of operational steps. Define task, planning, development, implementation, assessment, reflection, lessons, and finally, character.
So the toxic gray bureaucracy and the flourishing red network use the exact same internal project management processes.
They do, because the tasks themselves, planning a project, developing a solution, assessing the results, they are completely neutral. What changes is the context surrounding those tasks.
Ah, I get it.
Are you assessing a project out of anxiety, looking for someone to accuse and punish? Or are you assessing a project to evolve, adapt, and learn a lesson together? The process is the same. The relational intelligence driving it is totally different.
That is brilliant. Which brings us to the third image in the sources, and this is a 3D model. It shows the adaptable red diamond stacked directly on top of the rigid gray diamond. At first glance, honestly, I couldn't figure out why.
It is a bit counterintuitive at first.
It really is. Here is where it gets really interesting. If the gray diamond represents bureaucracy, anxiety, and stagnation, why is it literally supporting the red one in this 3D model? Do we actually need the gray?
Well, if you think about it like building a skyscraper or even the human body, it starts to make sense. A human body needs the rigid, inflexible structure of a skeleton to support the dynamic, moving muscles. So yes, we do actually need the gray structure, but we have to completely reframe our understanding of its role.
So we need some bureaucracy.
Ostrom wasn't advocating for a lawless anarchy. You need structure to avoid total chaos. The magic of sustainable governance is balancing opposing forces. You need the stability of structure, but you must balance it with active participation. You need authority, but you balance it with distributed responsibility. The 3D model shows that you build the adaptable red system utilizing the foundational structure of the gray.
The text actually explicitly echoes the architect Buckminster Fuller here, noting that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. You use the necessary scaffolding of the old system to build a highly relational, adaptable network right over the top of it.
That is the essence of transition. You transcend the rigid top-down limitations by layering relational intelligence over the necessary structure.
Okay, so we have established how ancient farmers managed pastures and how these diamond frameworks map out human cooperation. But how does this apply to you listening to this deep dive right now, especially if you are working in the modern digital workplace or navigating the sheer terrifying speed of the AI age?
The fundamental truth is that the commons haven't disappeared. The cow pastures have just gone digital.
The digital cow pastures. I love that. The sources list several modern examples, specifically focusing on the AEC industry architecture, engineering, and construction. They talk about common data environments. This is where thousands of digital models, schedules, and budgets are shared by dozens of different organizations building a single skyscraper or hospital.
It is an incredible amount of shared data.
Massive. They highlight open BIM initiatives. BIM stands for Building Information Modeling, which is basically a massive, highly detailed, collaborative 3D blueprint that everyone has to work inside without breaking it. And the text even points to digital communities governed by smart contracts, like the BIM Heroes DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. These massive digital spaces are the new commons.
And managing these digital commons requires understanding a massive economic paradigm shift that the text breaks down beautifully. During the industrial age, the economy rewarded the ownership of physical assets. If you owned the factory or the railroad, you won.
Right.
Then we moved into the information age, which rewarded the ownership of knowledge. If you had the proprietary data, you won. But we are now entering the AI age. Information is no longer scarce. It is incredibly abundant and cheap.
So what wins now?
Because of that abundance, the emerging AI age rewards stewardship. It rewards the ability to coordinate intelligence across people, disciplines, and machines.
It is deeply ironic, isn't it? We have AI tools right now that can process millions of data points, write complex technical reports, and identify structural project risks in a matter of seconds. But an AI absolutely cannot replace human stewardship.
No, it cannot. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains why major projects still fail today. When a modern billion-dollar construction project or a massive software rollout fails, it is almost never due to a lack of information. We are drowning in information.
You're totally drowning.
Projects fail because of relational failures. There is a breakdown in trust. Someone hoards vital data because they are afraid of being blamed by a zero-tolerance management team. Standards erode because accountability is inconsistent across different departments. AI radically changes the speed and volume of information, but human beings still have to govern the relationships behind that information.
That is where relational intelligence comes in. It is the human capacity for communication, for conflict resolution, for trust building. Relational intelligence is the engine that makes Ostrom's design principles actually function in the real world.
Without the relational intelligence to navigate trust and conflict, all the AI processing power in the world just helps you make the wrong decisions much faster.
That is a scary thought, but so true. Now, governance and relational intelligence can sound highly theoretical, like something you only discuss in a university seminar. So let's pivot and give you a highly practical tool you can use in your very next team meeting.
Yes, let's get practical.
The text outlines this brilliant 15-minute exercise called the Commons Health Check. It is designed for teams to pause and reflect on their shared resources before the fridge gets messy and the relationships break down.
The key to Ostrom's historical communities was that they didn't wait for a crisis to evaluate their rules. They constantly adjusted. The health check brings that habit to the modern office by asking 5 critical questions.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first is, what commons are we stewarding? You have to explicitly name it. Are you stewarding the central project database? Are you stewarding the team's psychological safety and trust? Remember the boundary principle we talked about earlier.
Mm.
If everything belongs to everyone, responsibility belongs to no one.
Okay, so define the commons. Got it. Second question. Are the boundaries clear? Does everyone actually know who participates in this specific commons and who has the authority to make decisions?
Right, you need to know who is at the table.
Third question, are people able to participate? If a decision is going to change how the design team works, are the designers actually in the room helping to make that rule, or are decisions just happening to them from on high?
That is the collective choice principle in action. Question 4 shifts to observation. What signals are we seeing? Look at the reality of the daily work. Are there constant information bottlenecks where work gets stuck? Are team members disengaged or apathetic? Or, conversely, are you seeing signs that trust is growing and communication is flowing? You have to pay attention to the feedback the system is giving you.
Which brings us to the final, 5th question. What one improvement should we test?
And we really need to emphasize that one. just one improvement.
Yeah, the text heavily emphasizes that small, consistent adjustments vastly outperform massive structural corporate reforms that never actually get implemented. You identify one specific thing, maybe clarifying a single approval workflow, and you record the commitment. You write down the owner of the task, the exact date you will review it, and the metric you will use to measure if it worked. It takes 15 minutes, but it completely shifts the dynamic of the team from being passive consumers of a broken system to active stewards of a shared resource.
It represents a profound shift in mindset. Traditional corporate governance always looks at a resource and asks, how do we control this? Stewardship looks at the exact same resource and asks, how do we care for it so it flourishes?
Control versus care.
Exactly. Control relies entirely on authority and demands compliance. Stewardship relies on active participation and cultivates shared responsibility.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started by dismantling the cynical myth of the tragedy of the commons, proving that humans are not inherently doomed to destroy what they share.
A very hopeful message, honestly.
It is. We explored Elinor Ostrom's relational design principles, which showed us that trust, clear boundaries, and proportional consequences are the actual architecture of true cooperation. We visualized the shift from the anxious, rigid gray hierarchy to the adaptable, flowing red network, understanding how to build new models on top of old structures.
Using the old scaffolding to build something better.
Exactly. And finally, we saw how in an age where AI generates infinite information, the true competitive advantage is the uniquely human capacity for stewardship.
The core realization pulling all these sources together is that we are never just managing resources or data. We are cultivating the complex human relationships that make managing those resources possible in the first place.
Which leaves us with one final, unexamined question to ponder as we wrap up. We have talked extensively about how humans must use relational intelligence to govern the digital systems and the AI tools we use today. But as these AI agents become increasingly advanced and more autonomous, generating their own ideas, executing workflows, and even interacting with each other without our input, what happens when an AI stops being just a tool we use and becomes a participant in the commons alongside us?
That is a wild thought.
Right. How do you build trust and negotiate shared relational boundaries with an algorithm? It is a wild thought, but it might just be the next great governance challenge of our lifetime. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you walk into a shared space, whether it is a massive digital database or just the office kitchen, take a look around. You might just see the commons a little differently today.